communism and about America, if you guys are okay with that. Yeah. We'll start with the bad one, we'll end with the good one, shall we? So if you haven't heard, 52% of millennials living in our country think it would be fun to live in a communist state. This is a direct result of two things. A Marxist communist takeover that is happening at the speed of light that was begun in the 1950s when Khrushchev said, and I quote, "I can take America without firing a single shot. You will be destroyed from within." So it's a product of that, which has been going on for decades. And it is also, I firmly believe, a product of children who were raised in this great country with a lot of privileges and rights and things that we all take for granted, and have never actually seen what communism looks like IRL, which for those of you old as me or older means in real life. The cure for this is to take your kids out of this damn country and go touring third world countries. Because let me tell you something, when they come back, they will have a renewed appreciation for the things that we've been taking for granted for far too long here. Until such time as we can readily do that, I'm going to tell you some stories about communism. When I was, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago now, when I was the mother of an 8-year-old, we decided we were going to go to Southeast Asia. And we ended up in Cambodia. And if you're not familiar with Cambodia, they had a little communist revolution. It was headed up by the Khmer Rouge back in the 1970s when I was a kid. And they walked into Phnom Penh, which was the capital of Cambodia, and they rounded up all of the doctors, all of the lawyers, all of the architects and engineers and teachers. In a nutshell, they rounded up the intellectual capital of that country because they knew if they could get rid of them, it would be smooth sailing afterward. And they said, you're just going to go out into the countryside for a little while, short term, for your own good. It's going to be better out there. Right? That's how communists roll. You guys recognize anything in those last couple of sentences I said? Where else have you heard, we're going to do something for our own good, and it's going to be real short, just 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? That's how they roll. So they took all of the people of Phnom Penh, and they rolled doctors and lawyers out into the middle of nowhere. They had no idea how to survive. And then they rounded them up and they shot them face down into shallow graves and ditches. But most of the time, they didn't have a lot of bullets. They were a little bit poor, the communists were. So to save the bullets, they would just axe them in the back. And to this day, when you go out to the killing fields outside of Phnom Penh, Cambodia, where I took my husband and my child when she was 8 years old, every single year when the rains come, the muddy, silty ground washes away and new bones rise up. That genocide occurred and wiped out a quarter of their people when I was a kid. And bones are still washing up. And they take these bones, the Cambodians do, because they never want to forget. And they put them in a gigantic glass structure that is in the middle of the just open field. And it looks like a ginormous sort of Rubik's Cube with glass walls. It's big, it's square, and it goes really high up. And every foot or so is another shelf. And they segregate the bones by type. So all the leg bones are on one shelf, all of the arm bones are on another shelf, all of the skulls of adults and children and babies are on another shelf, and so on. And my daughter, who insisted on going with us against my better judgment, but perhaps not. I look back on this and think I'm very grateful I took her there when she was 8, because she is not one of those millennials. She looked at me and she said, "Mama, how did this happen?" And I said, "Well, the government lied to them, baby, and by the time they figured it out, it was too late." That is communism. And don't you ever forget it. So then I started doing work in places like Cambodia and Thailand. As Scott said, I was working against the child brothel industry there, which, by the way, human trafficking is the fastest growing crime in the damn world, because they had figured, and by they I mean every single bad guy from the gangbangers down in Compton, where I live. Well, I don't live in Compton, but you get the idea. All the way to the Asian mafias, they had figured that there was more profit in selling a 7-year-old to a sex buyer than there is in running cocaine to addicts. And so every darn bad guy who's got a room temp IQ or above has moved into trading people over guns and weapons and cocaine and heroin. So I start fighting the child brothel industry, and I'm talking to a girl that we're interviewing in one of the brothels there. She was early teens at the time. And we looked at her and we asked her, we were running, rolls of film for a documentary we were doing. We said, did you know when you got here to this brothel what you would be doing? Because in Europe, the girls think they're going to go work in a hotel or a bar, and they're going to be a waitress, and they are drugged, and they are raped, and they wake up chained to a bed in a brothel. But they didn't sign up for that. They thought they were going to be a waitress. But in Asia, it's very, very different. The parents sell their kids to the brothels. So this young girl looks directly into the camera and says, yeah, I knew what I would be doing when I got here, but I am not unhappy. And my colleague from London leaned over and said, there's got to be something wrong with that translation. Ask it again. So we asked the question a second time, and she looked dead into the camera and she said, no, I knew exactly what I would be doing when I got here, but I'm not unhappy because my mother and father, actually her mother, I think her father was dead, my mother and 7 brothers and sisters have food on the table and clothes on their back, and they're in school and they're not starving to death. They're not starving to death. So that is communism for you. She came from Laos. She came from a still communist country where communism has rendered the average person like you and me so damn poor that they will sell their eldest daughter to a damn brothel so their other children don't starve. And that child will be happy she was sold to a brothel. She will be happy to be raped 10 times a night for profit until she dies at the hands of a John or a pimp or AIDS. So for all of you millennials out there who think you want to live in a communist state, go visit Cambodia, go visit Laos, go visit Cuba. Go talk to the old people still alive in the former Soviet Union, and then you come talk to me, because I think you're going to change your mind. So we were doing the work in the brothels, and my daughter was with me on one of the trips, and we took her out onto Tonle Sap Lake in Cambodia, because there was a floating orphanage. And it was on a houseboat, but when I say houseboat, you think Lake Mead, and you think yacht. I'm talking, it was a bunch of wood lashed together with a rope, and there was a little wood hut on top. And all of the kids whose parents had been wiped out in the last whatever, cyclone or typhoon or whatever they call it over there, were now living orphans on this houseboat. And they went to the bathroom in the water, and they drank the water, and they did their dishes, and they did their laundry in the water, in a lake that was the biggest lake in Cambodia, but is all of 8 feet deep during their dry season. And we're getting back into our little canoe to go back to shore after visiting. And my husband leans over and he grabs my elbow. I'm getting ready to step in the boat. And he goes, you gotta listen to her. She's about to say it again. And I'm like, who? And I look over, and there's a tinier little canoe that's pulled alongside our canoe. And in it is a woman who looked twice as old as me, threadbare clothing, wrinkled, pruned, probably was younger than I was at the time. And her toddler daughter, maybe a year and a half, is at the front of the boat, sucking on a bottle of dirty lake water, half naked. And this woman looks at her daughter, looks at my daughter, who's 8, dressed head to toe in pink, because that was her favorite color that year. Looks back at me and says, $1,000, you take. And my daughter leaned over and said, Mama, did she just offer to sell her baby to you? And I said, yes, honey, she did. That is communism. That is communism, where you will take your own flesh and blood and sell that to a tourist you haven't even talked to yet if they'll pay you $1,000 cash, because that way your baby grows up. That is the ugly face of communism. And now I'm going to talk to you about the old Soviet Union. Stalin was rolling in the hay in his little communist heyday, and they had these little camps that were called gulags, or work camps, concentration camps. All the totalitarian dictators had different names by them, for them, but they're all the same damn thing. And this guy went out without his passport. See, passports are very, very important to totalitarian societies because it lets them know who can walk free and who's going to go to their grave first. So when you hear that a digital passport plan is coming to your town soon, so that big tech and big pharma and big government can see very easily who's been vaccinated and who's not, so we know who to let in this church or the 7-Eleven down the road, you need to stand up and object on principle, but I digress. So he was caught out without his passport. He was sent to a work camp known as a gulag and put to work mining with his bare hands. They didn't even give these guys tools. So the miners decided they were going to have an uprising. And the guards got wind of it and they suppressed it. And the way they suppressed it is they locked off all of the tunnels into the underground mines and kept the guys underground for 5 months. So the guys ate through all of their food, and then they ate through all of the wood chips and sawdust. And when they couldn't eat anything else except for the walls of the mine, which weren't very edible apparently, then they tunneled to freedom. 5 months later, completely blind because they'd been in the dark for half a year, and wandered into the next town where Stalin's hit squad let loose the attack dogs and chased one of these guys down who had been found without his passport. And this guy, it's a first-person story, in his own words, as he was underneath the dog, realizing he was about to die, said, "I bit the neck of the dog out with my own teeth and heard it crunch so that I didn't die." So when you're flirting with communism, when we are failing to recognize communism, that is communism, where you will bite the neck out of a dog in order to save your own skin, and that is the only way he lived to tell about it. So we are living in America today, but I don't know about you, it's not the America I remember. Is it yours?
No.
I don't think so, right? So I'm going to transition to talking about oxygen, something I never thought I'd have to talk about in my life since I'm not a scientist. I leave that to Dr. Sandra Rose. Oxygen is really important. Cars run on gas and oil, and y'all know what happens to your car if you don't put gas and oil in it, right? The engine will seize up. Your body runs on oxygen. You don't put enough oxygen in it, your internal organs will seize up and they will die. True story. So if you go to OSHA's website right now, I don't know if they've scrubbed it, but as of a few months ago, there's a study on there that starts out with the sentence, "Human beings must breathe oxygen to survive." It's a self-evident proposition, but apparently it's news to Fauci. Anyway, I never thought a lawyer would have to tell a doctor such things as, "Yeah, guys, oxygen is important," right? Or fight for it, fight for the right to breathe in court. But yeah, so there's a problem when we're masking up, because the masks don't do a darn bit of good in keeping the virus out. The virus is 1,000 times smaller than the holes of the mask. So the virus just sort of flies on through like a mosquito going through a chain link going, ha 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 ha, right? But the mask is really good at cutting your oxygen intake and throwing you into an oxygen deficit. And the OSHA website goes through all the little side effects you get when that happens. You get headaches, you get fuzzy headache, you get lethargic, you get irritable, you get clumsy because your muscles aren't working so good. You get bad at orientation and concentration because you're not functioning on all cylinders. And then one of the last things that happens is you pass out. And so when you hear that somebody passed out, this is what you need to know. That is the very last thing that happens to you before you die. Because the next step on this little OSHA study website is cardiac standstill, which is exactly what it sounds like. Your heart actually stops. So did you guys see that Florida study that came out 2 weeks ago, right about June 15, June 16? All these parents put their kids in clean masks, and they sent them off to school, and then they measured, at the end of the day, they sent the mask to the lab to see what was growing on the brand new clean mask after only 8 hours with the kid in school. Do you know what they found? They found all sorts of stuff: staph, strep, a couple different kinds of each, pneumonia, bacteria, E. coli, Legionnaires or Legionella, I forget which, fungus. The one thing they didn't find on the mask was the virus. Why? Because the virus was sailed on through. And a whole bunch of mold and fungus was growing, a third of which was antibiotic resistant. So I'm going to continue to keep it simple, not for you guys because you're not stupid, but for the people who might be out of earshot listening to this online and not have heard me talk about it before. If you don't let your children lick the urinal at LAX airport when you fly through there, you probably shouldn't put a face mask on.
Yeah.
You might be better off letting your kid lick a urinal or eat their own poo, which is the same same thing, it's reconsuming your own waste product out of your digestive tract instead of your respiratory tract, than actually putting, a face condom, as Dr. Courtney Williams says, a face condom on their poor little faces. So there's a woman by the name of Dr. Marguerite Grisson, MD, PhD. Study came out right before Christmas last year. You can't find it on Google. You find it on DuckDuckGo. It's called The Wall Will Fall. The Wall Will Fall. She is a neurologist, neurophysiologist with a PhD in pharmacology in addition to her MD, and specializes in neurotoxicology, environmental medicine, neuroregeneration, and neuroplasticity. For those of us who aren't doctors, what that means in simple layman terms is she knows how your brain works. She understands what makes it sick. She understands how it can regenerate after you've made it sick and toxic. So she released this little study, and this is what she said. We know that the human brain is very sensitive to oxygen deprivation. There are nerve cells, for example, in the hippocampus, that cannot be longer than 3 minutes without sufficient oxygen. They simply can't survive. Right? So the acute warning symptoms, when you've gone too long, are headaches, drowsiness, dizziness, issues in concentration, slowing down of reaction time. These are reactions of the cognitive system. However, when you have chronic oxygen deprivation, how many hours a day are we wearing those masks? All of those symptoms that I just told you about disappear because your body gets used to it, which is a huge problem. Now your brain is getting used to the fact that it's not operating at 100%, and the thing that you would normally troubleshoot with to figure out that your foot or some other part of your body is not working at 100% is the very thing that is no longer working at 100% to figure out that your brain is being hurt because it is the brain. Nice little circular problem, right? The second problem is that the nerve cells in your brain are unable to divide themselves normally. So when our governments will generously allow us to get rid of the mask and go back to breathing oxygen freely in a few months, then lost nerve cells will no longer be regenerated. What is gone is gone. You understand what I just said? We're doing permanent brain damage. She went on to conclude with this as it relates to permanent brain damage, a child's brain, and the reversibility factor. For children and adolescents, masks are an absolute no-no. The child's brain is thirsting. It is thirsting for oxygen. The more metabolically active the organ is, the more oxygen it requires. And to deprive a child or an adolescent's brain of oxygen, or to restrict it in any way, is not only dangerous to their health, it is absolutely criminal. I repeat, it is absolutely criminal. Cannot be reversed. So I am talking to you, Kate Brown. I am talking to you, Cuomo. I am talking to you, Werner. I am talking to my own damn governor by the name of Governor Newsom. When you are making mask mandates like my governor did last Friday, 48 hours ago, and saying we are going to go back to school next year with 10 million of the 40 million people in California who are children being masked in school regardless of vaccination status, I am telling you right down now, you are committing crimes against humanity, and you should be masked. You know, there were 4 kids in Oregon who passed out in the last month or so. Did you hear about that? I know you're on the other side of the country. They lost one of them. I think one of them was like a 3rd grader at recess, passed out. That wasn't good enough for Kate Brown to roll back the mask mandate. Couldn't do it. Couldn't get her done. So then they lost another kid who was playing softball. Didn't occur to her at that point, maybe she should roll it back. Then they lost another kid who was running an 800-meter race, who said to the press, I'm so glad, I'm so lucky, I think was the term, that I passed out where I did, because then her head, as she went down, crossed the finish line. No, my dear, you're lucky you didn't die, because passing out is the last step before you die. But even that wasn't enough. They kept the mask mandate in place. So this little girl named Savannah Leigh talked to her mom a couple of weeks ago. Clay Clark hooked me up with her. Savannah Leigh goes to play basketball in a mask. Her mother had told her just the night before, you need to take the mask off. It's dangerous. But you're better off doing it with a group. Get all your little teammates to do it too. So the next day, she gets a call from the school, the mom does. And she's thinking, yeah, my kid took off the mask, and they're calling to tell me my daughter wasn't compliant. Yeah. That's not what they were calling to tell her. They were calling to tell her that little Savannah Leigh did not take the mask off and played basketball. And halfway through basketball practice, she couldn't breathe. She couldn't get a deep breath. So she went to her coach and said, hey, coach, can't get a deep breath. Can I take it off for a sec? And he said no. But then he relented and said, well, you can go ahead on into the locker room and take it off there if you must for about 60 seconds. Where she travels off to the locker room because that's what her coach was allowing her to do. And she tries to take the mask off, but it's already too late. She passes out, hits the floor. Now she is unconscious on the tile floor of the locker room while her entire team and all the coaches are outside. Luckily, one of her friends was going to the bathroom in a stall, wanders out 2 minutes later, grabs little Savannah Leigh off the floor, lifts her face, drags her over to the mirror to see literally if she can find the mirror, and she can't. She can't, because she can't breathe, she's got no pulse, no respiration, no heartbeat. Let me do the math for you, she's dead. And she's been like that already for multiple minutes. So now every damn coach who was too damn stupid to let her take the mask off, who was too wedded to the tyranny, too insistent on genuflecting to the altar of Fauci over his own damn common sense, is on their damn knees doing 7 solid minutes of CPR, and to no avail. When a passing cop walks by with a Narcan unit, which they use for drug overdoses, heroin overdoses to be specific, decides he's going to try that on her. They get her back. She crashes again in the back of the darn bus. Ends up in the hospital. They work on her some more, and they get her back a second time, and she stays with the grace of God. Hallelujah. So that is what Governor Kay Brown did, and I don't believe she has yet rolled back her mask mandate. And my governor, instead of looking a little bit to the north and going, seems like a bad idea. Kids are dying and having to be revived in their masks. Goes, hell yeah, baby, sign me up. We're going to mask all 10 million kids in this state and see how many we can kill. That's what he basically said to us on Friday. Isn't it? Right? Fun times. So let me recap exactly where we've gotten to in the last year. We have managed to close down our schools, our businesses, our beaches, our parks, our houses of prayer and worship, just like this one. We are arresting people for the simple act of breathing oxygen and using SWAT teams in Costa Mesa while the woman is breathing oxygen in Mother's Market, which is highly ironic, to arrest her for that act of breathing oxygen. We are arresting paddleboarders who are paddleboarding in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, miles away from the next nearest ship or human, for the simple act of being in the ocean that is rightfully theirs. And we are also arresting people for having the gall and the audacity to celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah in some of these states, or to take a knee and pray, or to stand up here and preach. That's where we've gotten in the US of A in the last 15 months. And if that is not concerning, I don't know what is. 61% of the small businesses in my state who are in the food industry will never, ever reopen. Our governor has broken the back of the people who pay his bills and his salary. 20% of the minorities in my state are unemployed. Those are rates we haven't seen since the Great Darn Depression. My governor a year ago decided he was going to run a skirmish line. He took riot-clad cops on mounted steeds after inviting all of us in on the park in front of the Capitol Mall in Sacramento along the West Steps, where we have a right to be because it wasn't cordoned off. And he decided, because we had the guts to fly a banner that called him out for being Hitler. It had a little Hitler mustache on his face. He got all kinds of riled up. And he decided he was going to send in 700 CHP officers and run a damn riot line against mothers who were sitting on the grass with 3 babies, breastfeeding, and little old guys who fought in the Vietnam War, who were doing the audacious, treasonous act of holding signs that said, Governor, please let us work. That is how he treated us in violation of the First Amendment. And then this guy, who gives hypocrite new meaning, comes out 2 weeks later, 4 weeks later, whatever it was, and is seen genuflecting at the altar of a bunch of BLM graffiti and telling people it's their duty to protest when he arrested us for doing so. Right? I don't know who said that, but say it again loud. What? You're not going to get any objections in my name. You know, he's also trying to digitally dog collar us, trying to do a little electronic passport statewide, since I raised a couple $100,000 and ran TV commercials in my county a month ago when he was trying to do it in Orange County only, and said, by the way, this is what Nazi Germany did, and we're not resurrecting the sins of yesteryear and doing them again. So now he's going to digitally dog collar us. And and as if that's not enough, he's going to suffocate our children. You know, Hitler, for his part, if you didn't know this, Hitler changed 400 laws in the first 6 years he was in power, in order to enable him to do that which he ultimately wanted to do but wasn't actually telling people at the outset. And of course, that was hunt down Jews and burn them or bake them in ovens. My governor changed 400 laws in the first 6 months. But he's not hunting just anybody right now. As of Friday, he's hunting our most vulnerable. He is hunting our children, and he is going to answer to the people of California if it's the last darn thing we do. And for those in my state, in my family, in my friendship circle, who had the audacity to call me a Nazi for calling our governor a Nazi, I have some special words for you. To hell with you and the damn horse you rode in on. Yeah. And I am going to fight it down if it's the last thing I do. And if you're not going to help me, those people in California, get the hell out of my way. Go goose step your way into a FEMA camp, because I won't cry in your grave when you're dead. And don't tell me I didn't tell you. That's exactly where you're going to end up. The rest of us, God-fearing, country-loving Americans, do not want to go there. We do not want to go there. Unlike all of those crazies, we want to fight this tyranny down. We understand it for what it is. Unlike all of them, we understand that masking children is a fiction that can easily turn fatal, and we want no part of it, because that is a war crime. That is a crime against humanity. Yes. And unlike all of the idiots in my state, I am never going to bow down and suckle at the teeth of Pfizer, who was fined $2.3 billion 10 years ago for bribing and kicking back money to doctors. And you really think they've got your best interests at heart? And J&J did the same damn thing. And now they're rolling out gene-altering protocols that have killed almost 10,000 people inside of the last 6 months, which is double the number of people who died from every damn vaccine we ever had, cumulative, in the last 30 years. And you think they have your best interests at heart? I started my career representing the companies, the Fortune 100 companies that polluted this planet. And I am here to tell you the truth, they do not. They do not. They do not have your best interest at heart. To the rest of America, what I would say to you is, this is the US of A. This is the hill we are going to die on. We are going to fight this Marxism down. We are going to fight this communism down. I am the great-great-great-grandchild of Patrick Henry, who, rather importantly, I never really understood it until this year, said, and rightly so, give me liberty or give me death. I am the grandchild of people who came out of Main Street. On the decks of the USS West Virginia, in the bloodbath that became known as Pearl Harbor, as the Japanese bombed his little fighter boat out from underneath him. My family doesn't go out without a damn fight. I do not go out without a damn fight, and the fact that I am here is proof that not only do we take these fights on, we win them. And with all of your help, and all of the help of the people who are within range and earshot of this, together we will fight this down, and we will once again be the land of the free, because that is our birthright. That is our inheritance. That is what always wins. God wins.